Hello everyone, I'm Katherine Stansfield, a poet and novelist. I'm delighted to be joining you for Cardiff Metropolitan's new reading series. Thank you very much to Cardiff Met for having me. I'm going to read you some of my poems and then answer some of your questions, which I hope will be useful. To get started, I'm going to read a poem from my first collection, Playing House, which was published by Seren in 2014. And the poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. It's called O Bees of Rhode Island. Your Bolshie in morning hover, smug humming zip tours of roses, those puckered up girls, while the pool's unblinking eye gives back your stateliness, your striped I'm greatliness. Hop a jig-along, stop. Take the measure of after Margarita me, bare-legged, still drunk in the gazebo. Why must you kamikaze for accidental grazes and sheer, not knowing swats? Why must you threaten me with your terrible kiss? Know this. When I am savaged by mayflies and ants swoon in the sweet relish, I'll praise you and your raffish pride. Behold my obeisance, O bees of Rhode Island. You are all propulsion, miracle, and the goodness of the day. The next poem I'm going to read comes from this pamphlet, All That Was Wood, which was published by Seren in 2019. And this short group of poems is the result of a poetry in residence commission I had. I was lucky enough to be poet in residence in a place called Cornerstone, which for those of you in Cardiff is in the city centre, tucked behind Marks and Spencer's. It was originally a neo-Gothic church that opened in 1855 and latterly has been turned into an event space with the help of a Heritage Lottery grant. It's a building that's had lots of different lives and has also suffered from decay, I suppose is the only way to talk about it. A building that's sort of become very run down at various points in its life. And this is a poem about some of the damage that the building experienced and what that meant to the church community there at the time. So this poem is called Watercourse. In the storms we opened doors on either side, stood clear for the flood to find its own expulsion from the vestry, as is water's wont, like the women who went in one door on their father's arm and out the other on their husband's. Saturday shoppers stopped to watch this cuckoo clock of newlyweds, as is their wont, and the clock ticked on, and all the while the water that the flood had left glistened in the bricks, soon to desiccate the mortar. Our baptisms were wetter than was meant. All that was wood bloomed mould, grew soft. When the doors swelled shut, I knew our days were numbered, so I got to work. By the time we handed back the keys, I'd pulled away a softened clump of wall, my want. This damp is testament to who I am, we are, this place. I know it doesn't matter where we go as long as we're together, yet I know my need, that I'll be called home swimming. And now I'm going to read some poems from my new book, We Could Be Anywhere by Now, which Seren published this year, 2020. And this is a book concerned with travel, with ideas about home, about identity, and about how our sense of self is so often bound up with places and languages, the languages that we speak in different places to understand our different selves. And I'm going to start with a poem called Against Blood. And it has as an epigraph a headline from a BBC News article from September 2014. And that headline read, "A cutting-edge DNA test could determine how Welsh you are. To say this is the way you decide who I am and who I'm not. A sample of body that speaks only couplings and accidents, emigration and abandonments, Scotland and Ireland to Buffalo and back. To say this is the way you sanction my belonging and my not, just like those wet days at school that kept us penned in the hall, the Cornish kids playing genealogy games all through break. And his father, and his father. To say this is the way you prove what's home and what's not, that identity is a permanent code you can map in a lab, when a swab can't show all the timid love I have. To say this is the way leaves me on the wrong side of a locked door I'll never open, when for the first time I'm trying the handle, trying to come in. I'm fascinated by the process of learning languages. I'm really terrible at learning languages, but I find it very interesting. So I tend to write lots of poems about that. And in this new book, there are lots of poems concerned with language. This is one of them. Second Welsh class. Our new identities are handed round on paper slips, and we work the room to greet ourselves. Who are you? What is your name? I am Mark Rees, and I am rather tired, and I can't complain, and I am fantastic. Mark is a storm he's learning to say, the easy sound shaping his mood so that he's always yown, yown, yown. But I worry for Mark and his endless cheer. How will he speak the fear that keeps him sweating in the dark before dawn, that deepest part of night? How will he find the words to own his need to leave this too small town, too far away from everywhere? I fold Mark up and shut him in my pencil case. Once he's shouting like this, it's best to be firm. Let's carry on. Where were we? I know. Who are you? What is your name? And for those who are watching this video and don't know much Welsh, there was a Welsh word in that poem you might have caught, which was iawn, which basically means fine, okay, good. So the first two poems I read from this book were concerned with being in Wales, speaking Welsh. I grew up in Cornwall, also really interested in Cornish history and the Cornish language and the relationship between Cornish and Welsh. This next poem is called Talk of Her, and it's about a woman called Dolly Pentreath, who for a long time has been thought to be the last native speaker of Cornish. And a lot of kind of mythology has grown up around the idea that the Cornish language died with Dolly, which is of course a ridiculous notion. There are lots of people who still speak Cornish today. I'm interested in the contested ways that people used Dolly, who was a fishwife, a woman who in some ways lacked a lot of agency in her own life, but has become an important figure for lots of different people. So, talk of her. They say she spoke no English as a maid hawking fish in Mousehole. They say she was found by the language man as if she was lost. For the day he came, she was raging. He thought her curses Welsh at first, then caught something else. A witch, they say, and Cornish her tongue for witching. They say she was wed and unwed. They say there was a child, A girl, though some say boy, say he died. By the end, she'd prattle anything for pence. They say she was the last to speak it, but listen. There's others here, still talking, and when I dug her up last week, 47 feet southeast from the spot they had marked, her with 3 teeth in that cracked and famous jaw, I tell you, she spoke just earth and water. So that's a poem about the past, a sort of historical poem, if you like, and that's one kind of journeying backwards and also journeying into somebody else's voice. And this book is all about journeys, really, in different ways, external and internal. And this poem is about that again. It's called One Way. In the morning, you will find yourself inside a human heart. You will be warm and notice with surprise the purple and the blue. Not everything is red in the temple. It will be loud, and you will be small, will have to be there and alive. Your own heart now, flea-sized, grain of sugar-sized at most. Once you're over the shock, you will rationalise and hold your breath in case such extra air makes the heart's rhythm catch, or worse, causes a clamorous blockage like the clanging fury of the airlocks you remember in the old house's pipes. By the time you've worried all this, you will be dizzy, need to lean against a ventricle, but lightly, in case your tiny fingernails tear the walls and drown you in the rush of this hospitable stranger's loose blood. You will put your hands in your pockets, and that's when you will find the bus ticket, tiny too, but your tiny eyes can read the type, and then you will know how you got there, that once again you brought this on yourself. And the last poem I'm going to read is the last poem in this book, and it's called The Birds of British Columbia. And this, my first fledgling in a year, starts again, with a goose landing fatly in the marina's grease. She, a Canadian goose, I suppose they just call goose here, sneak swims up, beak wide, as if about to honk. Surprise! Surprise! But the blue heron browsing for tea in the lee of the sea wall clocks her, sighs, and is away. The word might be languorous. He might be languorously away. And this poem might be my way back to heron, or to somewhere else, somewhere starting goose. So, those are the poems, and now I've got some questions from you to answer. The first one being, how would you describe your writing process? And I think that can be summed up in one word, which is slow. I write poems very, very slowly, and I think that's okay. I'm not in a rush. So what I tend to do is I do tend to wait for ideas to find me, and they always do. And that normally takes the form of an image or a phrase. One of those poems you just heard me read, Against Blood, is responding to that newspaper headline about a test to determine one's Welshness. And I find news articles really get me moving often in terms of poems. I feel like I want to respond to them in some way. I have an argument, I have questions. What is this about? What are you talking about? What does this make us think about? So when those kind of moments happen and I feel that need to respond to something or need to note something down, I will note it down in a notebook, and then I will often not do anything with it for months or even years sometimes. And then I will come back to those notes in a completely different context, really, from what I was thinking about originally. And then I'll sit down with a degree of perspective, kind of clarity, and I'll work up the poem from there. And I'll work it up phrase by phrase. I'll start to see images speaking to one another, but also crucially sounds speaking to one another. And I often build a poem up through sounds very slowly, and I'll produce pages and pages of notes, and I'll put them away again for a few months, and then I'll come back and I'll start to see some kind of order. So this process can take years and years and years, from the initial starting point to actually having a complete draft. I'm one of those slow poets. So the next question is, how do I edit my work? I've talked about that a little bit already in terms of coming back to those early pages. I guess I edit mostly by leaving a good gap between periods of writing, and I'm not afraid to do that. I will read the work aloud over and over again at different speeds, taking different lines out, reading the poem without them, moving them around. I also edit by workshopping them with a trusted group of fellow poets, and I get an awful lot from that in terms of having fresh eyes on the work, people asking me questions about my choices. That reinvigorates the work for me, and I can see it with another kind of clarity. So editing for me is more time, it's about sound, and it's about readers. Okay, so what book or author has helped to inspire or influence your work? So I'd say a major influence on me is the Welsh poet Samantha Wyn Rhydderch, who's based in Newquay in West Wales. And I first came across her poetry when I moved to Wales as an undergraduate. And her poems were so funny, and they were so clever and sharp. They had a kind of wryness to them. They were very arch, and I felt like I'd never read anything like that before. Her poems were kind of darkly funny, and I realised, it was quite a revelation to me, that you could be funny in a poem, because a lot of the poems I'd studied at school, at A-level, were really depressing, and were very dark, and were about kind of really big things. And that's quite a lot of pressure when you're sitting down to write yourself. But Samantha's poems made me see that there was another way to write poems, a way that made sense for me. She also throws voices a lot, so she has a lot of dramatic monologues from unusual speakers, and I found that very exciting and liberating. So she really showed me a different way to write poems at a kind of crucial time for me, and also she was very inspiring, and I felt like I had permission to be funny, and that was a revelation to me. Okay, the next question, what are you currently reading? So, I'll just grab this. I've just got a copy of A Portable Paradise by Roger Robinson, published by Peepal Tree Press. It was first published in 2019, and it went on to win the T.S. Eliot Prize, which you can see here. And I just got this for my birthday, which I'm very excited to read. So I'm looking forward to this. And the final question, advice for current creative writing students. I would say, don't be in a rush. It's easy to feel that you should be writing all the time and that you should be submitting work and you should be published immediately, when actually writing, developing our craft, learning about publication, about editing, understanding form, that all takes time, and that's okay. So I would say it's okay to do things slowly. That's a good thing. I'd also say that rejection is perfectly normal. Everybody gets rejected. I have 3 poetry titles to my name and quite a few novels as well, and I'm rejected all the time. I'm sending my poems out to magazines and not getting anywhere, and that's okay. It happens, and so you'll get rejections. That's all right. It's part of the process of sending our work out. The key is to keep going. The writers who get published are the writers who were able to pick themselves up again when somebody said no, and to say, okay, that's fine, that poem's not for you, I'm going to send it somewhere else, and to keep going and know that it might take a long time, but that's okay. Developing as a writer, getting a track record of publication, it takes quite a while, but that's normal. And I think that's the end of what I've got to say. So thank you very much for listening. Good luck with your writing, and see you soon.